Hello and welcome to the Popcorn Junkies. Do you need a companion for the next 15, 18 minutes or so? This is the new movie called Companion. It sits within that sort of Megan style horror, AI, thriller, kind of comedy noir-y type thing. It's a kind of curious hybrid of a film. It stars Zach Quaid. You might know Zach Quaid. He's the child of Meg Ryan and Dennis Quaid. He was the star, the breakout star, one of the breakout stars from the Amazon Prime series The Boys. A brilliant sort of cheeky, affable, warm, boy next door type vibe to him, which I really like. It also stars Sophie Thatcher, who's a young actress who I've kind of only stumbled across in a couple of films recently, most notably the Hugh Grant horror A24 piece Heretic, in which she plays one of two Mormon missionaries who gets trapped in his very odd escape room-esque hell of a house. But she's also apparently in Yellow Jackets, and the thing that's drawn me into Sophie Thatcher in each of her performances, and every time I've seen her in this film, in Heretic, is that I've said to people, she really reminds me of Juliette Lewis. Do you remember the actress from things like Cape Fear and was she in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas? She's sort of very offbeat, quirky, sort of avant-garde actress. And the weird thing is that in Yellow Jackets, I didn't realise, Sophie Thatcher, I think, plays the younger iteration of Juliette Lewis's character, or the other way around. As I say, this is called Companion. It's an AI sci-fi thriller / horror with strong comedic tones, which is kind of what The Boys is. To give you a quick grab at the front here, it's a riff on things like, especially this film, is a riff on things like Westworld, The Stepford Wives, but it also slides in there and mixes in there, if you imagine this is a sort of fascinating cocktail of influences. A little bit of Ex Machina, the AI Alex Garland film. And as with all things around AI and tech, and especially love and all this kind of stuff, it raises so many ethical and philosophical and existential questions. So this film starts with a really faux, sort of romantic, cringy, crass, cliche-ridden kind of romantic scene where Zach Quaid's shopping and Sophie Thatcher's character Iris is walking through the supermarket, and she's kind of idly just looking at all the produce, and then suddenly she stumbles across affable, warm, likeable young chap who's a little bit unshaven, but it's just a bit fumbly and a bit silly. And he knocks over a whole punnet of oranges onto the floor, and boom, romance is built and romance is born, and therein lies the story of their relationship. And what I like about the beginning is go with it. I was sitting there watching it going, oh my God, I hope the rest of the film isn't going to be like this. This seems really artificial. But the film, right at the beginning, and this is a spoiler review, but this is a kind of mini spoiler, because this spoiler is spoiled within the film. Almost within the first piece of voiceover, she says something about what drew her to Josh, played by Zach Quaid. She's sort of talking about the romance, what fired up her kind of love and her interest and sparked her interest in it. She then talks about how it was also the same thing that resulted in her killing him. So, interesting film in that it throws the gauntlet down right at the front and removes the jeopardy or the kind of unknowability of what's ultimately going to happen to Zach Quaid's character. You're told right at the front, and that's a really interesting experiment in storytelling, because it didn't diminish from the enjoyment of the rest of the film. So Sophie Thatcher, she plays an attentive, a thoughtful, if you were to park to the side, if you came into this film cold and you didn't know she was an AI and all this kind of stuff, she plays an attentive, a thoughtful, somewhat naive, you could argue a bit simple, quite cutesy, devoted, thoughtful, but quite one-dimensional kind of girlfriend. You know, she's nice, she's sweet, but maybe a bit dim. But as this film kind of posits, is that perhaps how men like their women? Eh? This is a film about what men want from their women. I mean, any film about the AI articulation of their dreams, fantasies, and wants, as in Ex Machina. I think the Ex Machina AI was constructed out of all of the main characters' search engine results around porn, wasn't it? So, you know, she is a manifestation of what Josh wants from an AI love companion. But they're not just love companions, they're emotional companions. They're not just sex bots, as he goes to great lengths to say later in the film. They're more than that. But what you realise quite quickly is they're not much more than a sex bot. They want the sex, they want a bit of personality, Josh does. But he doesn't want much more than that. And you could argue, is that the case for most men? So it's a clever film that right from the get-go superimposes, if you like, our own attitudes, societal attitudes to women, the way they're viewed by men, sexually, intimately, emotionally, etc. But also how they're viewed by other women, because quite quickly we see Josh and Iris heading off on a kind of nice break to meet some of Josh's friends in the hills, not the Hollywood Hills, but imagine something like that. And they hook up with a bunch of buddies, a bunch of Josh's buddies. And there's other women in the group, or there's another woman in the group. She's obsessed with Iris. She's looking at her, she's slightly jealous, she's got that sort of envy, she's kind of circling around her a bit. But what you realise is they're all interested in her because she's the new model. It's like Josh has walked in with a brand new iPhone that just happens to be his girlfriend. So all of their interests are piqued. They're kind of, they're marvelling at how she's, she's kind of more human than the last one, or more human than any of us expected, which again is clever. You're reminded of how this is what women and men do with women in the real world. We kind of neutralise who they are and turn them into types. What type are you? So the real human woman in the group of friends is quite intimidated by her. It's kind of like almost like envious of what Iris is. And all the way through this, Sophie Thatcher does a really good job of playing, essentially, a very humanistic companion bot. And she's sort of perplexed by some of the questions, but she meets people, she meets inquiries, and she meets questions with an open electronic heart and an open mind, and she clearly has a set number of answers. You can feel that her intelligence level on the app has only been set to, I think 40%. So you can feel she's only got so far she can go in her interactions with people. And so from the get-go, even before we've got into the kind of horror of her being, or the danger, or the trickiness, and it becomes quite a complex but fun kind of almost horror of errors, as we move through the film, and it sort of moves into sort of horror territory, film noir, thriller, chase movies. It's a bit Westworld at times and all that kind of stuff. But at the front here, you're having lots of thoughts about what women expect of women, what men want of women. There's even a gay couple in there, and it's like, what do men want of other men? What are we looking for in love? How far does the sex bit go to before the emotional side of the relationship kicks in, and all that kind of stuff? And there's this one character in this group of friends whose house it is that they've gone to, Sergei. And Sergei, I think played by Rupert Friend, is this over-the-top, overacted, to be honest with you, but he's kind of a good caricature Russian. And it's kind of talked about and inferred that he's up to dark stuff or dirty stuff. And I think everyone interprets that to mean that he's into criminality. But I think I might have missed it or misheard it. But I think maybe he trades in shit or something like that. And he's got this wealthy house. And he's quite sort of long-haired, and he's a bit weird, and he's very Russian. He's obsessed with Stalin. All his passwords for all his kind of tech and kit is Stalin's date of birth. A scene happens where Sergei oversteps the mark with Iris, and clearly this is where it's kind of revealed that they're all aware that she's, called a companion bot made by Empathetics. I think that's the company that makes them. But really, is a companion bot really just a slightly more elaborate version of a sex bot? So anyway, Sergei just fancies trying his arm with her. And this incredibly violent, confused, mistaken scene and situation or act of violence occurs between Sergei and Iris, which results in Iris turning up with blood all over. And therein lies that's the dilemma that the rest of the film sort of spends the rest of its time trying to kind of get everyone out of. Jack Quaid is in it up to his arms. Is there a suggestion that actually him and one other member of the group of friends have actually framed this setup? Have they potentially tweaked with Iris's kind of settings? There's a whole sort of elaborate plot line where the human, or the humans in the situation, are up to no good, because they want a bit of Sergei's wealth. But meanwhile, running alongside that is the treatment by Josh of Iris. And really, it's at this point, once the kind of situation or the kind of terrible kind of moment of violence between Sergei and Iris has happened, that Sophie Thatcher's character, Iris, becomes aware of her robotic nature. And I think at this point, she gives us a really, really sensational performance, Sophie Thatcher. She is really excellent. Very, as I say, threads of that Juliette Lewis sort of weirdness and kind of, there's a kookiness to her as well. But as she sort of discovers her own robotic nature, as she discovers that she's actually controlled by an app on Josh's phone when she discovers that he set her intelligence to 40%, and that sweet and goofy Josh is actually a tyrannical, self-serving kind of spineless young man seeking to control. You know, he's a man who just wants the least resistance from his partner, from his companion, from his girlfriend, and she serves that purpose as long as he's in control of all of her settings. And how many men in the real world would like to just have an app that controls the settings of the men? To be honest with you, how many women would like an app that sets all the settings and oh, clearly Nadia's got the settings for me. But do you know what I mean? It does speak to, in a weird way, it universalizes it. To what extent would any of us like to control the excesses and the personality traits of those we love and those that are closest to us and those we want to spend our time with? I mean, there's a moment early on where, you know, you feel that this is romantic, it's twee, it's sweet, they have a really neat relationship. And there's one shot of Jack Quaid, having sex with Iris when they're in Sergei's house before it all goes wrong. And it's very clever. They use such a close-up, quite grotesque shot of him orgasming that his face is just like, which is kind of ironic given his mum Meg Ryan did the most infamous orgasm in the cinema. He does one that's just horribly male and functional and perfunctory and gnarly. And then she's left lying there. And at this point, you sort of think, God, this isn't just what an AI sex bot goes through. This is what probably a lot of women go through. And as she's wanting to talk about intimacy, he just says, go off and go to sleep, Iris. And that turns her off. And her eyes do this thing where they roll up and they go opaque. It's really creepy. It's really unsettling, and it's really kind of chilling. So as the film progresses, the moment of violence that's got them all now, they're all in a hole. They've got to deal with a dead Sergei. They've got a load of cash. They also want to run off. They want to exploit the situation. This whole kind of film turns into a kind of comedy of AI errors, and the band of friends becomes stretched, becomes fractured. There are split loyalties. We discover that in the group there is another AI companion bot, which is good because then it unsettles you and you're thinking, oh, I wonder if any of these characters could actually be companion bots. And so it's a film that keeps twisting and turning and is forever inventive with the plot. I mean, sometimes it stretches the imagination or stretches the believability around certain plot lines, but rarely does this film sag. It has a good eye on the believable aspects of the science, you know, around the programming, around the control. When she discovers her controllability forever, you know, she can change the colour of her eyes and all this kind of stuff. And so, in a sense, this is one of those films where the monster or the horror or the fear or the frightening thing, which is the AI that's gone rogue, we're always told AI is the problem. In fact, Iris becomes the hunted because they want to destroy her. And in keeping with that kind of believability of the tech, you know, one thing about the companion bots that's key is that they can't lie. They're programmed not to lie. And so, you know, when she discovers that humans actually lie to each other, you get a great couple of scenes here where you see through the sort of almost the technologically honest, unjaundiced eyes of a robot, of a bot, just what humans are like. And it encourages you at times, this film, to kind of look at humans and go, oh, right, okay, so lying is a big deal for men. And in fact, there's a very funny moment in the film where she's dashing for an escape and a police officer intercepts her. Because she knows she can't lie, she flicks her settings, because she's managed to wrest control of her settings. She flicks her settings onto German language so that she's telling the copper exactly what's happened and what she's seen, but he doesn't understand because it's in German. So there are some really funny moments, again, where the tech is believable. And there's an interesting moment where when she does, for example, where this film becomes interesting is sort of 2/3 of the way through, it becomes quite a strong metaphor about coercive control, about domestic violence, about relationships, toxic masculinity, misogyny, you know, the idea that men like to control or, you know, have, subservient wives. When she gets control of the app, it's a kind of liberating moment where she's kind of got control of herself. She can change her voice, she can change her strength, she can change her intelligence to 100. I think they missed a trick there. I thought when she sort of took herself to 100, she could have perhaps almost been overwhelmed with genius at that point. There are so many beats and turns to this that make this feel, oh my God, this is what could happen. There could be such a thing as a companion bot in future life, and it will merely be an extension of the way in which, principally, not all, as I've said earlier, principally men, can curate the kind of women they want. And this is a film about a female AI robot, companion bot, reaching beyond her sex botness and reaching beyond even the gender that she's been given in her physical sort of skin form by her manufacturers and by Josh, reaching beyond that and emancipating herself and liberating herself. So this becomes a sort of feminist revenge strive for freedom, but parked within the gender specifics of an AI model that's been programmed by men for men. You even get a moment where the manufacturers of the AI who have to come in and try and fix her, they reveal how pervy so many of the people who buy these bots are. Oh yeah, don't worry, this isn't unusual. Many of them we find just sort of like trapped and like held hostage in basements and stuff like that. So it really speaks to the inherent dodginess and murkiness of male interest and control. And even if men want that nice romantic detail, it's just something they have to get over so that they can get the sex. And Sophie Thatcher's carrying all of this in the form of being an AI that has limitations on her emotional kind of register. And that's what's so clever about the film, and that's what's so clever about her performance. She gives us all of these moments of discovery. She finds out what her limitations are as an AI bot, companion bot. And you feel her sadness. And yet, of course, you know it's not sadness because she's programmed. It's an incredibly complex, layered, incredibly detailed performance that kind of makes the one in Ex Machina almost pale into insignificance. This is much more nuanced and much more kind of in the real world, whereas Ex Machina was sort of in a sort of almost a science experiment laboratory, wasn't it? If I was reaching out to other films it kind of reminded me of, it's a completely different genre, but films like Thoroughbreds, it had a similar sort of thematic tone to it. It was breezy as it moved through quite heavy sort of subjects. It didn't kind of become a lesson in anything. It didn't try and ram a message home, obviously. I think there's a deep irony, big spoiler alert, big spoiler alert, though we know that Jack Quaid's character dies. I think there's a big irony that his manner of death is at the hands of a household implement that you could argue is at the very lowest end register point of AI in the home, but it's kind of a piece of automated kitchen equipment, and it's quite witty and quite funny that the most sophisticated AI companion bot uses something like this to kill him, and it's great. You just watch it happen, and yes, it's gory, yes, it's grisly, but you enjoy it. He's a monstrous character, and yet his monstrosity, Jack Quaid's character, is just that. How much of that is just an extension of most men? And given that his character is in a desperate situation, reaching for desperate measures, trying to limitate what will inevitably mean that he'll have to go to prison for the rest of his life, you just see the real him come out, which makes the moments where you cut back to the opening scene and you realise that opening scene where they met and the oranges fell on the floor, that's called the love link or something. That is the moment that the bot is told, or the bot is programmed to have that as a memory. So this even becomes a film about what are memories. The bot can't understand that they're a bot and that they were made at this point, because they're like, but I have the memory of us meeting, this romantic moment when we were meeting. And like Jack Quaid says to her, well, it's just a creation, but how many of our memories are just creations? How much of the AI is like a human? How like AI are we, actually, in the way that we think? And yet throughout all of this, though it takes on something of a revenge arc, she stays sweet and she stays perplexed throughout. Sophie Thatcher doesn't change, because she wouldn't, because she's AI. Yes, she's been modified. Yes, she's modified herself. And yes, she's realised what's going on and how she needs to survive as a robot. But she doesn't become dark or sinister or twisted. She doesn't become malevolent. She doesn't turn evil. And I think that's really key. In films like Megan, you can see how the doll has turned evil. She simply is fighting for survival. And so she becomes the relatable protagonist, whilst all the humans in this film very much become the monsters. And there's, a real tragic arc to the other companion bot that you discover within the group. And there are moments of real contemplation about what it means to have memories and to feel things. And it's like love, or the programmed version of love that these companion bots experience. There's something very simple about it and very sweet. And when you see their realization that they've been programmed to feel this, there's another level of sadness that creeps in, which again is so clever. So as a film, it's economic, it's funny, it's clever, it's fully committed to what it's doing. It's creepy, it's thought-provoking, you know, right down to the opaque eyes that roll down, turns her into a doll, turns them into dolls. That was creepy. There's some genuine sort of jump scare type moments too. It's quite bloody. There's an inherent sadness, and it manages to do all those things around AI, which is kind of deliver an entertaining film, but also a thought-provoking film. This film for me did everything that Don't Worry Darling, the Florence Pugh, Harry Styles film, didn't manage to achieve. This manages to be a successful, it's more than a B movie. This is a really, you know, tight, well-crafted, well-controlled piece of filmmaking. There were a couple of beats in there where maybe they stretched. They asked us to kind of, you know, leapfrog over a few moments of disbelief. But by and large, everything made sense. Everything was believable. You bought into the tech, you bought into the emotions. And for me, it just became a film that was really interesting about the male view of women, male control of women, the male idea of the kind of female partner they want, and how even in an AI companion bot, she needed to reach beyond the limitations that he was sort of that he was using on his app to control her. So I just like that. It's a women's lib film, interestingly, even though it's directed by a man. So if I was to score this, please go and see it. It's great fun. It's great fun with great performances, laugh out loud moments. It's fast, it's furious, it moves at a pace, and it's not too long. I'd give this 93 out of 100.